If any of you cause one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for you if a great millstone was fastened around your neck and you were drowned in the depth of the sea. Woe to the world because of these things that cause sin. Such things are bound to come, but woe to the one through whom they come. If your hand or your foot causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life maimed or lame than to have 2 hands or 2 feet and to be thrown into the eternal fire. And if your eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life with 1 eye than to have 2 eyes and to be thrown into the hell of fire.
So, having responded to the disciples' question concerning who might be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven, Jesus has placed a child in front of his followers and he gives them a lesson in humility. In these words we've just heard, he carries on this theme, and if we're honest, well, Jesus' words get a bit uncomfortable for us to hear, don't they? It's widely acknowledged in these verses that Jesus is moving beyond just children as being his definition of little ones. Now he's broadening it to include anyone we might consider inferior. And he tells his followers that although the world we live in might say that these little ones don't matter, that they're almost indispensable, the kingdom of heaven, the one we're called to be part of, says different. And it's not someone else's job to make sure they're cared for. As followers of Jesus, it's a responsibility we all share. We're called to live out the kingdom that Jesus is talking about, to follow it in such a way that no stumbling block is placed in the way of the weaker members of our community. It's not just the insiders, those we find it easy to get on with, nor is this just the outsiders, those outside of church community, but the weakest, the most vulnerable, the ones we might not usually come alongside or find easy to come alongside. The least, the last, and the lost. Hang on a minute, you might be thinking. Jesus has already given us a filter to apply to this list. Those who believe in me, that's what he said. It's true. The trouble is, we don't always know whether people fall into this category or not. So if we want to err on the side of caution, that means we'll need to avoid placing stumbling blocks, well, in front of anyone. Anyone who's put their childlike trust in Jesus. Which might include the homeless, or the asylum seeker, the prostitute, someone who struggles with drink. And so the list goes on. And if we choose not to do that, to ignore it, well, Jesus is pretty clear on the implications. In a piece of deliberate exaggeration, absolutely intended to emphasise his point, Jesus says that if any of us are guilty of getting in the way of someone's relationship with him, it would be better for you if a great millstone were fastened around your neck and you were drowned in the depths of the sea. And this is no small millstone Jesus is talking about. It's the largest of millstones, literally translated donkey millstone, because of the role that donkeys played in driving these stones round and around at the mill. If that's around your neck, you're on the seabed before you know it. Bearing in mind Matthew loves referring us back to the ancient scriptures, it's worth noting that this type of language has been used elsewhere. Go back to the Old Testament book of Exodus and you'll find these words used to describe what happened to the Egyptians as they chased the Israelite people into the Red Sea. The floods covered them. They went down into the depths like a stone. Wow. Who wants to be compared to Pharaoh and the Egyptians? But church, it's about to get even tougher as Jesus reverts back to similar language he used at the Sermon on the Mount and tells us that we need to remove parts of our bodies if they're leading us to stumble, to sin. And in this context, especially if they're leading others to sin too. I love this time of year. The colours of the leaves on the trees are incredible. But while I've experienced my fair share of autumns, it was only recently that I learnt why nature works that way. We all know the trees shed their leaves in autumn. But did you know that the reason they change colour is because as part of this process, the tree itself extracts all the goodness of the leaves into its branches, its trunk and its roots. And it gets rid of all the stuff it doesn't want into the leaves, which in turn fall from the tree. The tree knows that if it wants to be healthy, to discover new life, we might even say resurrection, to flourish and thrive and continue to grow, it has to get rid of the things that would hinder that new growth. With more exaggeration about cutting off hands or feet or tearing out an eye, this is what Jesus is saying. If something's going to stop you growing, remove it. That's why we have to guard ourselves against status, against wanting to be in charge, against our selfishness, our me first, our ambition, our pride, our stubbornness. All those things and more show up in all sorts of ways. When we discourage or we unfairly criticise someone with our words, when we fail to forgive, when we exploit others, ignore them, or fail to care for them when they need it. Because these things are not only stumbling blocks in our faith, they are so often stumbling blocks to the faith of others, even to a whole community's faith. And Jesus reminds us that although this is what it means to live in God's kingdom or as part of God's church, it's still always a choice we have to make. These are not easy words to read, but they address a harsh reality. As the theologian Tom Wright summarises, learning about God's kingdom means facing the real evils of the world and realising that God hates them far more than we do. So next time you see the leaves falling from the trees in autumn, may it prompt you to prayerfully ask, Lord, what do I need to do to remove these things from my life so that I can grow in your kingdom and enable and encourage others to do the same.